Okay, Rabbi Lebowitz, I assume if there are any questions, we'll ask people to use the chat.
Sounds good.
Okay, okay. So friends, we're going to start in just a second. Everyone is muted. Maybe we'll have a little time at the end to unmute, but in the interim, if you do have a question, I ask you to please use the chat function, which is live. So let me start by saying good evening and welcome to one and all. It's a special pleasure to have on our call and to acknowledge the presence of Rabbi Joel Schreiber, the chair of the board of REITs. Wonderful to have you with us. I also want to just take a moment to remind everyone that we've arranged a full calendar of programs, events, classes to help prepare you for the Yamim Noraim. All of our Moshe Green Tochnit Elul classes are in full swing. We have 5 minutes of Teshuva every morning at 8:30. Next Thursday night is our Rosh Hashanah virtual wine tasting with the Carmel Winery. Lots of wonderful activities, so I hope that you will join us often. Just a quick word of introduction. I don't want to take even more than 60 seconds of Rabbi Leibowitz' precious time. On Shabbos, we'll read about the mitzvah of Bikurim, and the Torah tells us, "V'samachta b'chol hatov asher nasan lecha Hashem Elokecha u'veisecha atah b'halevi v'ager asher b'kirbecha." It's a difficult line to understand because on the face of it, the Levi and the Ger aren't very promising candidates for Bikurim in as much as they aren't landowners in Eretz Yisrael. So Rabbi Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg has another interpretation. He says it's not that the Ger and the Levi will be included in the mitzvah of Bikurim, it's that they'll be included in your simcha. If you're the beneficiary of Hashem's bounty in this world, it's your obligation to turn around and include others. And I was thinking about this comment in reference to our speaker tonight. As many of you know, Rabbi Aryeh Lebowitz has served as the Mar D'Asra Beis Knesset of North Woodmere since its founding in 2004. He's currently the director of the Smicha program at REITs at Yeshiva University. Rabbi Lebowitz has a gift. With an encyclopedic knowledge that spans the length and breadth of the Jewish canon, he has a unique capacity to make the complexities and intricacies of Torah accessible and relatable to everyone. And he's taken that gift and he's cultivated it. And like the farmer in our Parsha, he's turned around and shared it with everyone. Online, you can find almost 10,000 shirim that he has recorded. Now, I've only listened to the first around 6,200, so I can't personally vouch for all of them, but it's a pretty good bet that any shir of his that you can find will be illuminating. He does it all with great humility and dignity to deliver our Moshe Green Tochnit Elul Teshuva lecture. It's a pleasure to call upon Rabbi Lebowitz.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rabbi Levine. Thank you, Rabbi Buchler. And I have to say, I'm somewhat grateful that this is happening on Zoom. I remember years ago attending a Shabbos Hagadol drasha in the Jewish Center, and Rabbi J.J. Schachter was the rabbi at the time, and I saw the Rabbi Emeritus, Rabbi Lem, Zichrono Livracha, sitting right there in the audience listening to Rabbi Schachter's drasha, and the assistant rabbi, Rabbi Berman, was sitting and listening as well. And in a million years, I never imagined that I would be invited to speak at the Jewish Center. So I have to pinch myself a little bit. But I think if I was actually there in person, I would freeze. I don't think I would be able to pull it off. I would just be so nervous. It's such an overwhelming honor to be able to speak with you and to this very special and historic kihila, and to all of the other friends who joined to be able to share Torah with you this evening. Now, as we approach Rosh Hashanah, obviously the focus of the Jewish people is always supposed to be on Teshuva. We always reflect on what was this past year. And generally speaking, what I try to do, certainly in recent years, is to, instead of focus on the negative, instead of focusing on all of the averos or the shortcomings that we've had, is also to try to focus on the positive and to build on the positive. And that proves to be somewhat of a greater challenge this year. In terms of the events that are happening in the world around us. When we look back, it's hard to find as much positive, but I think that's part of our avoda, that's part of what's expected of us as Jews, is to find what's happening that's right, what's happening that's good, and carry that forward and build on it and use those as building blocks for the future. I'm reminded, Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach has a comment in one of his svarim in the Halichos Shlomo, where even though the Gemara in Maseches Rosh Hashanah tells us that we read this week's parsha prior to Rosh Hashanah every single year, this week's parsha includes the curses of the Tochacha, and the Gemara says, yes, we have to get that out of the way before Rosh Hashanah, because Tichle Shana V'Kiluloseha, let the year and all of its curses end. And the Gemara Rosh Hashanah tells us that's what we're supposed to realize, that whatever negative things happened, we're hopeful that those things are over when Rosh Hashanah comes. Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach writes that he didn't like an overemphasis of that point. He didn't appreciate it when every time you'd greet someone before Rosh Hashanah, they would say, oh, let the year and its curses end. Tichlev Shana V'Kiluloseha. Why be overly negative? Yes, we say it. It's true. It is a Gemara, and it does appear in Jewish literature, but it's not a point to emphasize. He used to get upset. It's a fascinating idea. Shlomo Zalman used to get those little calendars, you get in the mail. The OU sends out, I think, still those little calendars that for the whole year. And at the end of the calendar, if you flip all the way to the back of the calendar, it says at the end, Tichle Shana V'Kiluloseha. And Shlomo Zalman used to say, it didn't even happen yet. The year didn't happen yet. How can you say, let the year and its curses end? We didn't even have any curses this year yet. How could we be posech, pel the Satan, open the mouth of the Satan and allow him that entry into determining what our year is going to be? But when we think about tshuva, it's not only thinking about the past and whether we think about it in a positive or a negative way. Tshuva also involves a lot of thinking about the future, about how things are going to be different, about how that which we can control, we're going to try to live better, and that which we can't control, to recognize that we can't control it and put ourselves in the hands of Hashem. And from that perspective, this year is a little bit easier, because we do realize that there is very, very little that we can control. It's always true. It's always true that there's very little that we can control. This year we realize it a little bit more. It's something that's more obvious to us, that there's very little that we control about the future, and that we are in the hands of Hashem. But what I want to focus on tonight is one particular element of tshuva that maybe sometimes gets overlooked, and that is the time element of tshuva. Not only the process, what we have to do, and how we have to think about things, but the fact that tshuva is a unique mitzvah in that tshuva is a mitzvah that takes into account the past, the present, and the future, all at the same time. And if one leaves out any of those ingredients, if there's a lack of focus on the past, or a lack of focus on the future, or a lack of action in the present, then we're not doing it right. Then there's something wrong with the tshuva. The Rambam in the second parak of Hilchos Tshuva, as a student of Yeshiva University, before I worked there, I was a student of Yeshiva University. One thing we know that we learned from Talmidim of Rav Soloveitchik, and Rabbi Schreiber, who was so wonderful to see, can certainly attest to this. One thing we know is that when it comes this time of year, there's one book that we open up first. Right before we open up our hearts, or maybe right after we open up our hearts, we open up a Rambam. We open up the Rambam Hilchos Tshuva. That's where we find our guidance in this time of year. And the Rambam describes how to do tshuva, a basic manual. Tshuva is an amazing mitzvah because it's a mitzvah that is so easy to describe and yet so difficult to do. You can say it in a sentence, but then to actually do it, that's a much greater challenge. And the Rambam describes, Umahi hatshuva. What is tshuva? What do you do? So he describes very basically, Hu sheya'azov hachotei cheto. We abandon our averos. V'yasiru mimachshavaso. We commit from it in our minds that we are no longer going to do those things. V'yigmar belibo shelo ya'aseu od. We make an absolute commitment that I will not do this anymore. Shene'emar ya'azov rasha darko. An evildoer has to leave, has to abandon his derech. It's such an interesting word to use. I would have said ya'azov rasha chata'av. he should abandon his sins. He should, no, darko, because that's maybe just as an aside, let's just point out what the value of that word is. A derech means a path that a person has taken in life. You know, most often when a person sins, it's not because the person wants to sin. Most often it's because a person finds themselves in a context where it's difficult not to sin. It's much more about the context. You know, what do we celebrate on Rosh Hashanah? One of the things the Gemara tells us we celebrate when we blow the shofar is it's a zecher to the ayil shel Yitzchak. It's a zecher to Akedas Yitzchak. So what does Akeda mean? The word Akeda means the binding of Yitzchak. Right now, if you think about it, what Yitzchak's greatness was in that moment was the willingness to be slaughtered. It wasn't the binding. The binding was just a way to get him to stand still in order to be slaughtered. But in there lies something that's a major key to Teshuva. Because why was Yitzchak bound so tightly? So Chazal tell us what happened. Yitzchak was on the altar. Avram was about to shecht him, was about to lower the knife, and Yitzchak says, Dad, I know that as much as I'm committed to this, and I believe that God told you that this is what you're supposed to do, I have a feeling when I see that sharp blade coming toward me, I'm going to jump. You know, it's somewhat natural. It's like I have nothing against my dentist. But when he comes at me with that drill, you know, you ever like sitting in the dentist chair and then like you just find yourselves like, you find your whole body like clenched up? I'm pretty sure I know that this is going to happen, Yitzchak says. So do me a favor, bind me tightly so that I won't have a choice. And that's what we celebrate about Yitzchak. Not that he made the decision to allow himself to be slaughtered, but that he put himself in a position where he couldn't fail because he took away the opportunity to fail. He took away the opportunity to jump. Yazov Rasha Darko, more important than abandoning the Avera is abandoning the context within which we do the Avera. I always found that dieting and eating healthy and eating right and living right is most often the best mushal, at least in my experience, to Teshuva. It fits so nicely because when we talk about changing our behaviors, so we know what works and we know what doesn't work. Here's what doesn't work. To say, I'm going to go shopping and I'm going to buy all the sugary sodas and the sugary cereals and the cakes and the cookies and everything else, but my willpower is going to overcome. No matter what, I'm just not going to touch any of that stuff. That doesn't work. It never works because our willpower ultimately breaks down. No, you know what works? When we change what we buy. Because if we open up the cabinet and all we see is low-fat foods, and we open up the refrigerator and we see lots of vegetables, our choices are limited to that which is healthy, and we know that we're going to do better. If you want to exercise in the morning, we know how to do it. You don't decide, I'll set my alarm and I'll wake up because if anything goes wrong, if anything goes wrong, I can't find my sneakers, I can't find my socks, I guess it wasn't meant to be. So I'll roll over and go back to sleep. How do you make it happen? The night before, you take out all of everything you're going to need, the exercise clothing and the whatever it is, you fill up your water bottle, whatever it is that you need. You have it all set up the night before so that there are no excuses when you wake up the next morning. Yazov Rasha Darko. We have to leave the derech within which we sinned. But I digress. That's a little bit off topic. So the Rambam says, how do I do tshuva? I abandon the Avera. I commit not to do the Avera again. V'chein yisnachem al sha'avar, shneimar ki achrei shuvi nechamti. I have regret over that which has happened in the past. And after I do tshuva, I'm no longer proud of the Averos. Sometimes you hear people who change their lives, but the way they talk about the old days is a little too, they seem a little too happy when they talk about the old days, when they talk about the old Averos. It doesn't always sound like embarrassment. Sometimes it sounds like, there's a little too much nostalgia, when people sometimes describe how great it was when they did certain things. Oh, remember when we, in high school, we made fun of that person and we made his life miserable and we did these horrible things that people describe, and sometimes they describe them as if they're waxing nostalgic about this wonderful thing. That's not tshuva. Tshuva looks like we're embarrassed about what we did. That's why there's a halacha that you're not allowed to remind a Baal Tshuva about the Averos that he did, because it's legitimately embarrassing to him to hear about that. He's made a commitment to no longer be that person. V'yeyid olav yodea talumos, the Rambam says. Hashem, who knows everything, can testify about this person, shelo yashuv lazeh hachet v'olam, that he will never return to this Avera again. Shnemar v'lo namar od Elokeinu l'mas yadeinu v'tzarech lisvados b'sfasav, and he has to say vidui, he has to confess, v'lomar inyanos elu shegamar b'libo, and to verbalize that which he has committed. But if you look at this Rambam closely, look what the Rambam is telling us, that in order to do tshuva, you have to look at the past. You have to have charata ala avar. You have to have regret about the past. You have to commit to something right now, and that is azivas hachet. We have to right now stop doing the avera, abandon the avera, and we have to look toward the future. Kabbalah ala asid. That's all. Those are all critical steps in tshuva, and it's not only true about tshuva; it's true about life in general. For a person to be successful, it is. There's a song. I forget which famous Jewish singer sings it, but it's based on a Musar sefer that was written hundreds of years ago. I'm not going to sing it because I can't. I'm a terrible singer. But the words of the song are Ha'avar ayin, v'ha'asid adayin, v'ha'hove keheref ayin, da'aga minayin. So ha'avar ayin, the past is gone. Ha'asid adayin, the future's not here yet. V'ha'hove keheref ayin, and the present is like the blink of an eye. Da'aga minayin. Why would I worry about anything? Soloveitchik Zichrono Livracha thought that this song is antithetical to the way a Jew lives his life. A Jew does not say that the past is gone, nor does a Jew say that the future is not here yet, and therefore the present is meaningless. Therefore, what do I have to worry about in the present? To the contrary, what do we do every year on Pesach? What do we do every year on Tisha B'Av? Pretty much all of the major Jewish experiences. We look toward the past and we recount the story. On Pesach, we recount Yetzias Mitzrayim. And why is it so important to recount Yetzias Mitzrayim? Because by doing so, we know that there's a Jewish destiny that we're looking forward to. That L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, we're looking toward a Jewish future. And it's specifically because there's a Jewish history and a Jewish destiny that the present is so important, that what we do right now at this point in history is so important, that it's not ha'avar ayin v'asir adayin. Ha'avar is who we are, makes up the past, makes up who we are. The asid, that which is going to be, that provides our guiding light, our goal, where we want to return to, where the Jewish future is, where the future of our nation is, what our goals are. We yearn for Mashiach, we yearn for a Beis HaMikdash, and that all of that educates how to behave in every moment of time, past, present, and future. That's what the Mishnah Maseches Avos in the third paragraph of Pirkei Avos tells us, that Akavya ben Mahalal Elomer, histakel b'shlosha dvarim v'yata balidei avera. If a person looks at three things, he will not sin. Da me'ayin basa, you have to know from where you came, la'an ata holech, and where you're going, v'fnei mi ata asid litem din v'cheshbon, and in front of whom you're going to have to account for all of your current actions, past, future, and therefore the present matters so much. That's the Jewish view of things. But what I want to talk about tonight, I realize I'm already 20 minutes in, but what I want to talk about tonight is there ever a conflict between the present and the future? Do we ever find in Torah, in halacha, that we have to prioritize our present over the future or our future over the present? And if so, how do we prioritize that exactly? And I think you'll find that there are several examples in halacha, I'm not talking about hashkafa, in halacha, several examples, 4, 5, 6 different examples, if not more, of situations where there's some sort of conflict between a choice that has to be made between the present and the future. We'll start with this. For those who learn Daf Yomi, and even for those who don't, the Gemara Maseches Shabbos talks about doing a bris milah on Shabbos. If a baby is born on Shabbos, so it's a wonderful mitzvah. The mitzvah of milah is so important that we even perform the mitzvah on Shabbos. The Gemara tells us that in the town of Rabbi Eliezer held that you would even do the machshirei milah on Shabbos. Even the preparatory work for the bris milah can be done on Shabbos. But the Gemara in that context, there's a whole parak of Masechah Shabbos called Rabbi Eliezer de Mila, based on the halachos of bris mila and what you're allowed to do on Shabbos and not allowed to do on Shabbos. The Gemara talks about what if the baby is not in the shul where the kalim that you need for the bris mila are. The Moel brought his bag to the shul, assuming the bris is going to be in shul, but the baby's not there. So what do you do? So we think, what do you mean, what do you do? We have an Erev, so carry the baby to the shul or the kalim to the baby. What's the big deal? Yeah, but what if there's no Erev? So can you carry something to shul? So or carry the baby to the shul or the kalim to the baby. So the Gemara tells us that we bring the kalim to the baby. We bring the knife, the mila knife, whatever is necessary. The Moel always gives a whole list of items that you need to bring for a bris. Some like absurd amount of diapers and cloths and wipes that, like, you think as you look at the list you can't possibly need that much. But they try to be safe, so they give you a whole list of things that you're going to need to bring for the bris. You bring that bag to the baby, and then you could perform the mila on Shabbos. So Tosfos asks the question: why bring the bag to the baby? Why not just bring the baby to the bag? If the bag is in shul, carry the baby. And Tosfos says, I'm not just asking why this or that. Tosfos says, I'll tell you why it makes more sense to bring the baby. Because it's an Isser Da'oraisa on Shabbos to carry something that's an inanimate object. To carry a bag of stuff, of items, that's an Isser Da'oraisa, that's biblically prohibited, to carry such items through a public domain. But to carry a baby is a living being. There's a principle in Shas called Hachai Noseas Atzmo. You ever notice that it's easier to carry a baby when the baby wants to be held than it is when the baby doesn't want to be held? You ever try to carry a toddler who's trying to squirm his or her way out? Impossible, because they have a say in whether they're going to be carried. And if you try to carry a 2-year-old or a 1-year-old or an infant, and they want to be carried, and they rest their head on your shoulder, it's the easiest thing in the world if they want to be carried. They're doing a lot of the carrying of themselves. You're not doing all of the carrying. The baby's doing a lot of the carrying. And therefore, says Tosfos, wouldn't it be better to carry the baby? Because it's not really even carrying when you carry the baby. So Tosfos answers, it's a good idea to carry the baby, but there's a problem with that. Tosfos answers that what's going to happen after the meal is over? Imagine the mother's at home with the baby. Now you're bringing the baby to the shul. The mold's going to do the bris milah. Now what? The baby has to get back to the mother. And now at this point, the baby's already weakened from the bris. So at this point, the baby's not going to be allowing itself to be carried, or maybe not capable to allow itself to be carried. And therefore, it will turn out that you will have carried the baby to the bris in violation of an Isser D'Rabbanan, and carried the baby back from the bris in violation of an Isser D'Oraisa. Wouldn't it just be better, Tosfos says, therefore, to carry the kalim to the baby and not the baby to the kalim? Which is a remarkable comment, because it seems like just a simple Tosfos, but we're really saying something much more profound in that Tosfos. Because what Tosfos is telling you is, don't carry the baby to the bris, because after the bris, you're going to have to carry the baby back. And you have to think about that now. Even though right now the lesser avera would be to carry the baby, but after the bris, it's going to lead to a bigger avera. It's going to lead to a more serious violation. And the Rashba disagrees with us, says, I don't care. Why does it matter that after the bris, after the bris, the baby's a chalash yesh b'sakana? We know, if anything, the last few months have taught us, if someone is dangerously ill, you can do anything. You're allowed to violate anything. So after the bris, you can do whatever you want. Why does it matter that before the bris, that after the bris, you're going to have to carry the baby? After the bris, of course, you're allowed to carry the baby. There's nothing wrong with it. The point of conflict, apparently, between Tosfos and the Rashba is that Tosfos says, right now, you already have to think about the future. And even though right now carrying the baby is the lesser violation, you already have to think, but where's this going to lead me? Whereas the Rashba says, no, you live in the here and now. And if in the here and now, the lesser violation is carrying the baby, then that's what you would do. I don't have to think about the future. Do we know what the future holds? Do we know if we'll even be here for the future? I just got a shaila last week. Someone called me up last week and said that they unfortunately suffer from advanced kidney disease, so they have to they have to go for dialysis all the time. So you should never know from such things. Dialysis is not fun. It's not something that's the way my kids describe everything. It's either fun or not fun. Like that's the what defines what is good in life and not good in life. So, but dialysis is a lot worse than not fun. It's a very challenging thing for a person to go through. But the person has to go for dialysis, and this is obviously critical. They can't choose not to go for dialysis. This is something that they need to do. But they're working out their schedule for dialysis, and the choice is to either go on a Shabbos or on Yom Kippur. And they want to know which day they should get in a taxi or have someone drive them to go for dialysis, on Shabbos or on Yom Kippur. So you have to figure out which one is the worse Aveira, right? You always try to do the lesser of the two evils. So we don't prefer to drive on either one of those days. But if you have to, you have to. But you get to choose which one. So we have like this idea of triage in halacha, that when something has to give, we always try to give on the less we always try to sacrifice that which is the less severe avera in order to save ourselves from violating the more severe avera. So which one do you do? So there are two schools of thought over here. One school of thought is find the lesser avera and do the lesser avera. So if violating Yom Kippur is only a lo saseh, and violating Shabbos is a chi of skila, Shabbos is worse than Yom Kippur in a certain sense. But on the other hand, the other way to look at it is, well, which Shabbos is the option? The Shabbos before Yom Kippur or the Shabbos after Yom Kippur? Maybe it's all about timing. If the person is asking, should I go on Yom Kippur, which is Monday, or should I go on the preceding Shabbos? Maybe the answer is that you go on Yom Kippur. Because if Shabbos comes and you don't need to go, so keep Shabbos. When Yom Kippur comes and then you need to go, so then you'll go. But maybe if the choice is between Yom Kippur, which is Monday, and the following Shabbos, maybe then I should go on Shabbos. Keep Yom Kippur. Right now is Yom Kippur. Observe Yom Kippur. Are you able to in a healthy way? Yes. So observe it. And when Shabbos comes, you'll do it then. Meaning, don't think big picture. Think about right now. And there's compelling reason to think in that in those terms. Because at the end of the day, we really don't know what the future holds. We have no idea. For all we know, we won't be here by the time that Shabbos comes. For all we know, Mashiach will have come, all of our illnesses will be healed. We don't know, things can go in any which direction. None of us knows what the next day brings, but we do know what our responsibility is right now. So this is a famous machlokas. There was a wonderful Jew, a wonderful Talmid Chacham who davened in my shul in the last years of his life, by the name of Rabbi Maurice Lamb, Zechrona Livracha, Rabbi Norman Lamb's younger brother, who I think it's safe to say wrote the best-selling book of Jewish law in history, next to the Bible, I guess. Rabbi Lamb wrote, obviously, The Jewish Way in Death and Mourning. He also wrote The Jewish Way in Love and Marriage, but The Jewish Way in Death and Mourning, I think, sold even more copies, sold over 1 million copies. A Jewish book of halacha. Sold over 1 million copies. I wrote a couple of Jewish books of halacha. They're all in my basement. I printed 1,000 copies and they're all in my basement. He sold over 1 million copies of The Jewish Way in Death and Mourning. So Rabbi Lamb was a master rabbi, and he was living around the corner from me. So I asked him once, Rabbi Lamb, would you mind critiquing my drasha for me? Just, he came to my shul anyway. He davened in my shul, and he would always introduce me. I remember the first time he introduced me to his brother. This is my rabbi. I was so embarrassed. I didn't. So he came to my shul, and I said, "Would you mind critiquing my drasha?" So I remember he said to me, "Are you sure? You sure you want that?" I said, yes, I'm sure I want that. So I spoke for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. And then I went to his house afterwards, later that afternoon, and he sat with me for about an hour and a half, telling me everything I did wrong. I don't know how I managed to do an hour and a half of things wrong in the 10 or 15 minutes, but I managed. And one of the things I did wrong was the following. I said, I had mentioned in the drasha, there is a famous Gemara. And he said, a rabbi should never say there is a famous Gemara. I said, why not? There are certain Gemaras that are very well known. He said, no, because there's inevitably, there are going to be people there that never heard of that Gemara. And you just made them feel foolish. You just made them feel like they're unintelligent or uneducated. And you never want to make someone feel small. You want to make people feel big so that they have what to, that they can feel that they have what to aspire to and they have what to accomplish because they are great and they therefore can become even greater. You never want to make a person feel small, especially on a throwaway line like that. Why would you do that? Why would you say there's a famous Gemara, a lesson that I thought was so deep and so profound? So there is a machlokas in the poskim that some people know, some people don't. It's not really so famous. There's a machlokas in the poskim about the following situation. There was a Jew who was in jail, and I'm not talking about like a contemporary kind of situation. This is going back centuries where Jews were typically thrown into jail just for the crime of being Jewish, and or for practicing their Judaism. And the authorities were willing to allow the fellow to leave the jail on one day of the year, to get out of jail one day. He gets a one-day reprieve. So the question was, which day should he choose? So there's a Teshuvas Radvaz. The Radvaz writes in the Teshuva, Chelik Dalet Simin Yud Gimel, he said that he saw one of the other poskim discuss this, and he said the posik that discussed this got it all wrong. He got it all wrong. Because the way he was thinking about it was, oh, should he pick Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur is such an important day. Maybe he should pick Yom Kippur. Or maybe not. Maybe Purim. Because Purim, there's Persume Nisa, and even though it's only Midivrei Kabbalah, it's not a Din D'Oraisa, but you have the value of Persume Nisa, of publicizing the miracles. So maybe you should pick Purim, says Radvaz. All wrong. It's all wrong. That's not the way to think about it. If someone asks you that question on a Thursday in the beginning of September, you know what day you pick? A Thursday in the beginning of September. If they say you have one day that you could daven with a minyan, one day that you can do mitzvos, one day that you're free to eat kosher food, that you're free to live like a Jew, you know which day that should be? Hayom. It should be today. That's the day it's supposed to be. Don't look at what's going to be the best day in the future. That's what Radvaz writes. Chacham Tzvi disagrees. Chacham Tzvi says, no, the calendar changes every day. And there are going to be more important days. Meaning, wouldn't you say that if you had an option to get one day free that you would choose, and you have a child's wedding, let's say, coming up, that you would choose the day of the child's wedding? You would think there are days that are more important. There are days that are more exciting. So you'll look forward, think about what's the more important day, and choose the more important day. This actually comes up all the time. Let's say a person is told by their physician that, look, you're strong enough to fast, but you're not strong enough to fast 2 days within a single week. So if you want to fast Tzom Gedalia, great, fast Tzom Gedalia, the day after Rosh Hashanah. But then you're not going to be able to fast in Yom Kippur. And you can't fast in Yom Kippur if you fast in Tzom Gedalia. Or should you say that if you want to fast in Yom Kippur, then you better not fast Tzom Gedalia. So which one should the person choose? So the Radvaz would say, Hayom, today, fast Tzom Gedalia. Because you know what today is. I don't know if I'll still be here Yom Kippur, but I know that I'm here now. So I'll take care of what I have to do right now. Whereas the Chacham Tzvi would say, no, Chacham Einav Barosha. You need to look forward. You need to look a little bit into the future. You have to think about the future. Think about what the decisions you're making today, how they're going to impact what's going to be tomorrow and the day after and the day after. And you have to take that into account in halachic decision making. Here you have this conflict of today versus sometime in the future. A woman called me up a couple of years ago, and she asked the following. A woman does not daven in my shul, but she lives in my neighborhood, and she had gotten tested. She had gotten swabbed to see if she's a bone marrow match for somebody, and she got the call back. I don't know how many of you have ever gotten swabbed or got that call back. The reason she called me, even though I'm not her rabbi, was because I also I was a donor of bone marrow stem cells once. Because I was a match for somebody, which is like winning the lottery, meaning there's not a very great chance of actually being a match for somebody. It's not like a kidney donation where if you want to give one and you're healthy enough, you could they'll find someone who can use it. But when it comes to bone marrow, you really have to. It's like a 1 in a million. So I had the great suchus of doing it. So this woman called me up and she told me that. She was a match. She got called back, she was a match. I said, Mazel tov, that's wonderful. You'll get to potentially save a life. That's great. She said, I know. I'm so excited. I think it's great. Here's the problem, she said. When it came to scheduling this, the scheduling is very important because they wipe out the immune system of the recipient in advance so that they could sort of import this new immune system into the recipient. So it's very important that you do it on time, right? You can't delay such a thing, and you certainly can't back out, right? If you've committed to it and now they've wiped out the person's immune system, a common cold could kill them. So you need to actually give. There was actually a case in Israel where someone had committed to be a bone marrow donor and the last second changed their mind and said, I don't want to give, after they had already wiped out the recipient's immune system. There's a discussion in poskim, is it possible to commit murder, b'shev v'altase? Is it possible to be passive in the commission of murder? If it is, that's how you do it, right? If it's at all possible, that's how it would be done. So there's a court case in Israel, can a person be compelled to do such a thing? So to give at that point, once they've already gone through the preparatory work. But anyway, this woman wasn't interested in backing out. She said that they were talking to her about the timing, and what they came up with was that the ideal time was Erev Yom Kippur. Happened to have been Erev Yom Kippur that year. So she wanted to know, should she said, if I do it on Erev Yom Kippur, nowadays they don't go into they try to avoid actually taking bone marrow. They just take stem cells, which, they put a needle in one arm, a needle in the other arm. You sit there for like 6 hours and the blood comes out of one arm, goes through the machine, the stem cells are removed and the blood comes back in the other arm. But you sit there for like 6-7 hours, sometimes longer, as that's happening. And it would be challenging. It's exhausting. So it would be challenging to fast the next day. So she said they want to do it on Erev Yom Kippur. So she called them up and she said, can we do it a week earlier? Because Erev Yom Kippur, it's just going to be difficult. I'm not going to be able to fast. And they told her, look, if you say you're only going to do it a week earlier, we'll take it from you a week earlier, but it's really, really better for the patient if you do it on the day that we suggested. So her question was, should she do it a week earlier, where in all likelihood things are going to go well, or as well as they would have gone, but the doctors aren't thrilled about that possibility, or should she do it on Erev Yom Kippur? And this is part of the issue. On Erev Yom Kippur, you have a life to save. I remember I asked Rav David Feinstein Shlita, he should have a refuah shlema. I asked him what he thought. He said, he made me feel a little silly. He said, this is not a hard shaila. He said, if someone asks you, they could save a life with, let's say, just to make up numbers, an 80% chance of success or a 90% chance of success. What do you think the answer is? He didn't say it like this, but this is the way I heard it. What do you think the answer is? So the answer is 90% chance. Of course, you take the greater chance of success. He says, okay, so now we know she's going to do it on Erev Yom Kippur. Now, if someone asks you, can I go through such a procedure on Erev Yom Kippur if it means I'm not going to fast on Yom Kippur? Are you allowed to save a life on Erev Yom Kippur if it means you're not going to fast on Yom Kippur? Yeah, of course you're allowed to. Is she allowed to not fast on Yom Kippur? Well, you're a rabbi. Figure out how sick she is. You have to speak to the doctors and find out if she's ill enough to not fast on Yom Kippur. And if she is, then she won't fast on Yom Kippur. And that will be what happens. It happens to be at the end of the day, the woman had a tooth infection and it disqualified her from being a donor. Even the slightest infection is just amazing the way the human body works. So she ended up not doing it. But so much of this is about, do I look at right now or do I look at the future? And the answer is, sometimes I look at right now. There's a halacha, the Shulchan Aruch paskins in Hilchos Shabbos, that there's a halacha. A lot of people are maybe not as careful about this halacha as we should be, that one is obligated to eat 3 meals on Shabbos, Men and women alike are obligated to eat 3 meals on Shabbos. There is a machlokas in the Rishonim why women are obligated in the third Shabbos meal, because normally women are exempt from time-bound positive mitzvahs, and the third Shabbos meal seems to be a time-bound positive mitzvah. So there are different answers in the Rishonim why women are obligated in the third Shabbos meal, but what every Rishon agrees is that women are obligated in the third Shabbos meal the same way men are. We have to eat 3 meals on Shabbos. Shulchan Aruch says this. This is not just advice from a friend or family. The Shulchan Aruch says this. When you're eating that Shabbos day lunch, and there are all these types of kugel and chicken and meat and all of these dishes, think for a second. If I keep on eating, am I going to be able to eat shalashudas? It's December, and Shabbos ends at 5:15 or something, and it's already 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm still on my second Shabbos meal. If I keep eating, will I be able to eat shalashudas? Says the Shulchan Aruch, HaChacham Einov Barosho. A person has to think toward the future in order to be able to make that decision and to stop eating. Because yes, it might be a more enjoyable meal right now for you, but you also have to think about the future. And you have to think about where it's going to put you. I'll give you just one other example. There are so many examples of this, where the present and the future conflict with each other. I'll give you one example of Teshuva from Rav Moshe Feinstein. Rav Moshe Feinstein, Zichron Livracha, in Orach Chaim Chelik Aleph Siman Daled, was asked a shaila by another great rabbi, Rav Yitzchak Hutner, the Chaim Berlin Rosh Yeshiva, had sent a shaila to Rav Moshe Feinstein. And Rav Moshe Feinstein said, Rav Hutner asked me the following question. There was a person who had a highly contagious disease, a highly contagious illness, and they needed to be put into quarantine. Which is the only other time I heard the word quarantine before the last 6 months was when I learned about this tshuva. Whoever heard about quarantine, it was like something in a movie when there was going to be some sort of attack and the people in the spacesuits would come and they would, whoever heard of such a thing? But this is now we've all heard too much about this. But Rav Moshe was asked, someone was going to need to be put into quarantine, and forget about Clorox wipes, forget about hand sanitizer. Whatever they bring in with them was going to have to be burnt, was going to have to be destroyed. Should they bring their tefillin in with them? A man was going in, he's going to be there for 2 weeks. Whatever he brings in was going to have to be destroyed when he leaves. They were just going to burn it down. Should he or should he not bring his tefillin? Again, here you have this conflict. Right now he has a mitzvah of tefillin, so he should have to wear his tefillin. But you have to think about the future. What's going to be with these tefillin? Rav Moshe says to bring in the tefillin is to bring them toward their destruction, and you're not allowed to do that. However, Rav Moshe says maybe if you're already wearing them, maybe then you're allowed to walk in with them. He discusses that possibility, because right now you're already doing a mitzvah, meaning the quality of a current mitzvah maybe overrides, in a certain sense, that which will be in the future. But I think although these are all halachic examples, I want to take a couple of minutes to discuss hashkafa in terms of the present and the future. As Jews, we believe very, very strongly that we are made up of our past experiences and the past experiences of our ancestors. If sometimes a young yeshiva boy will talk to me about challenges that he's having in his religious life. I used to teach at a high school for 18 years. I taught in DRS High School, a wonderful high school in the neighborhood here in the 5 towns. And sometimes you'll have a boy that will go to Israel for a year or 2, and he comes back and he discovered God, and he's all of a sudden he's got all sorts of problems with everything that his parents do. And sometimes you'll have this conversation where someone is going to be talking about their parents as if this 18, 19-year-old kid is somehow more accomplished, is somehow morally superior. And you have to stop for a second and say, who do you think paid your tuition all those years? All those opportunities that you had, who do you think gave you those opportunities? Who built you to bring you to this point? We are We are midgets standing on the shoulders of giants. Yeah, were there certain shortcomings in previous generations that we hope to improve in each and every generation? Of course. We're fighting a battle against Yeridas Hadoros, generally losing the battle, but doing our best to try to fix little things that we can here and there to try to improve on previous generations. But we recognize that we're midgets standing on the shoulders of giants, that we are very much made up of not only our own past experience, our family's past experiences. And we also have a sense of where we're going. And the more a person thinks about where he's come from, he or she has come from, and where he or she is going, and what the goals are, and the broader lens you look at life in, the better educated you're going to be in terms of making the correct decisions for the present. How many times, certainly throughout the past few months, I could tell you I'm sure Rabbi Levine has had, I can't even imagine the challenges Rabbi Levine has had in the past few months, but as a rabbi of a small shul on the South Shore of Long Island, just a little, a small little kehila. I can't tell you how many, at first, it's hard to say this, it's very hard to say these words. When the pandemic was at its worst, it was easier to be a rabbi in the sense that people needed help, they needed encouragement, they needed chizuk, and that's what we were trained to do. As things got better in terms of how many people were getting ill, and there started to be discord and disagreements about what's responsible behavior, what's irresponsible behavior, and everyone had their own opinion. And some people listen to this doctor, some to that doctor, and some to no doctors at all. And you see families being torn apart. And you see people just not getting along with each other anymore. And people disrespecting each other. I can't tell you how many families I've seen that were torn apart by disagreements in terms of how to handle a situation. Now, it's clear there are certain lines that beyond which are just irresponsible and beyond which are just too much. There are certain lines, but reasonable minds can disagree within a certain range. Before we get into any sort of machlokas, any sort of dispute, any sort of long-lasting dispute, we should always think about what's going to be in the future, about what kinds of relationships are the most important relationships that we have. The Gemara in Maseches Erev in Daf Nun Dalet says, "Hai Alma kibei hilula damya," that this world is like a wedding hall. In what way is this world like a wedding hall? Is it all a party? It's not all a party. This year was not this past few months have not been a party. In what way is this world like a wedding hall? Rav Asher Weiss had the most magnificent vart. He had the most magnificent Dvar Torah to explain what it means it's like a wedding hall. I was just at a wedding tonight. That's why I couldn't do the share at 8 o'clock. I pushed it to 8:30. I was at a wedding tonight. And I will confess, I came about a half hour late, and I left early. During Corona, I certainly don't stay for the dancing. I don't want to see what's happening at the dancing. So I left early. I came a little late. I left a little early. And you know what? That's okay. I'm allowed to. You know why I'm allowed to? Because I'm not the father of the chassan or the kala. I'm not the mother of the chassan or the kala. I'm not the brother or sister of the chassan or the kala. Something about a wedding. Sometimes, certainly in healthier times, hundreds of people can come and go during a wedding. But you know who's there at the very beginning? The family, and only the family. And you know who's there at the very end? The family, and only the family. Says Rav Asher Weiss, "Hai alma kebehi lula damya." This world is like a wedding. There will be lots of people that come and go in your life. There will be lots of relationships that you have, good friendships, not such good friendships, convenient friendships, not such good. Lots of people come and go. When a person comes into this world, he's surrounded with family. When a person leaves this world, they're surrounded with family. A person takes that kind of perspective. A person thinks about, before I get into an argument, before I say something that I can't take back, before I hurt somebody in a way that will never be forgotten, is this going to be worth it in the long run? Is this going to accomplish what I want to accomplish? Is this going to build on the close-knit family that my parents and grandparents worked so hard to be able to build? Is this going to be something that is going to be easy to reconcile later on with what our true goals are? And when a person takes a look at the past and a person takes a look at the future, we're going to be so much better equipped to make the right decisions. You know, when we daven for a Shana Tova Umetuka, a good and sweet year, it's because we recognize that good is not always sweet and sweet is not always good. And sometimes that which is good is challenging, it's difficult. Sometimes it means biting our tongue. Sometimes it means that we have to do something that's uncomfortable. It means swallowing our pride sometimes. That's not so sweet, but it's good. And we hope that the good and the sweet should always go hand in hand. And that's what we wish for ourselves and for our families. And Bezrat Hashem, we should see in this coming year that we and all of our families in good health should have a Shana Tova Umetuka. We should have a year that is good and that is sweet. Of course, everything, Kol David Rahman al-Tav, everything Hashem does is for the good, but He can do it in a way that's sweet as well. And Bezrat Hashem, for us and all of Klal Yisrael and all of humanity, it should be a year that is good and sweet simultaneously. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening, everybody.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Lebowitz, for those beautiful and inspiring words. Ksiva v'chasima tova.
Ksiva v'chasima tova. Take care.